So, Hari Om everyone, and welcome to the fourth session in this program of Living Through the Gita. And I hope you have been following the last three sessions which we have done so far. And if you haven't, it's available on the YouTube on the Living Through the Gita channel. So you can subscribe to it, and whenever there's something new coming up. And besides the sessions on the Bhagavad Gita, I'm also going to be putting on some other material as well, which is relevant to what we are studying in the Bhagavad Gita as well. So please do subscribe and listen and reflect and practice on whatever we have done so far. So this session is on chapter number 3, which focuses on Karma Yoga. And I hope you can all see the screen, these slides. Yes?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So what we have covered so far, I'll just go through quickly through what we have covered so far. In the session number 1, we saw an overview of the Bhagavad Gita, the setting within which this text takes place, and we saw how the logic and the argument which flows through the whole of the Bhagavad Gita can be seen as a coherent way of looking at life and looking at the fundamental issues of life and how that can be solved through the philosophy and the practice of the Bhagavad Gita. In session number 2, we saw Arjuna's condition in detail as to what was its condition right in the middle of the battlefield, one of the greatest warriors of his time, having almost a kind of breakdown in the middle of the battlefield. And we also saw the guidance given by Lord Krishna and the overview of chapter number 2. So it's important to understand that, where this Bhagavad Gita is located. The location itself in the middle of the battlefield between the two sets of cousins, and what is the condition of Arjuna. Because as I mentioned that Arjuna is a representative of man, you and me. It is Arjuna's condition, it is our condition as well. And therefore, the Bhagavad Gita is as relevant today as it was 10,000 years ago. And it is because it deals with the fundamental issues of human life and the human condition. So it is relevant for us today because we are in the same kind of condition. And you can imagine that now in this kind of lockdown in which we are, some of the emotional and the kind of psychological stress we are going through is very similar to what Arjuna might have been going through in the middle of the battlefield. Session number 3, we saw in detail Bhagwan's response to Arjuna's condition and question. So Arjuna expresses his further doubts about, fighting this war, and he comes up with the 5 arguments, as I mentioned, of why he should not fight. And what are the reasons that he is not going to engage in the battle. And he puts his bow and arrow down and he says, I surrender to you, Lord Krishna. I don't want to fight. Tell me decisively what to do, what is good for me. And then we saw Lord Krishna's guidance in detail, the basis of knowledge, which is called Sankhya. And then Lord Krishna also gives him the guidance in terms of the social norms. So he says, okay, now even if you kind of, don't consider the knowledge, at least there is another way of looking at your situation, and I can advise you in terms of the social norm, what you should be doing. And the section number 4, which Krishna's guidance on the selfless action, the path of Karma Yoga. So here we have got a kind of summary of the path of action in terms of the guidance which are from number 39 to 53 in the second chapter. And then finally, the markers of the person of wisdom. So all this, I hope that you have kind of reflected on and understood really, the basis of the whole of Bhagavad Gita, which is kind of, summarized in chapter number 2. So today, I'm going to still talk about a bit about the logic and flow of thought so far, chapter number 1 and 2, so that we can see the connection between what is happening in chapter 1, how Lord Krishna's guidance comes about in chapter number 2, what is the kind of things he's talking about in terms of the knowledge and the path of action, and what are the markers of the person of wisdom. So Arjuna's question in chapter number 3, and why it is important for us as well. So every time Arjuna asks something, we have to kind of consider that why is he asking the question, and he's asking the question on our behalf as well, that this is what might be going on. If we have been following the logic of the Bhagavad Gita, then there are certain issues which arise which require clarification, and Arjuna gives those in terms of the question he asked throughout the Bhagavad Gita. So remember that, in our tradition, it is a dialogue which goes on between the guru and the disciple. In this case, Arjuna has got Lord Krishna himself as the guru. He is the divine teacher. Arjuna is the human disciple. So his questions are going to be our questions as well. So in the next 6 verses, then the nature and the inevitability of action is given by Lord Krishna to Arjuna. And a very interesting part of the chapter number 3 is about the spirit of yagna and the wheel of action. And this is quite a long section in terms of what it talks about, because it is giving us a cosmic picture of what is happening in terms of action and reaction, cause and effect. And if we see it within that context, then we can understand our own situation and location within the totality of creation, and how this can be then applied to or translated in terms of karma yoga. So this is a very interesting section of chapter number 2. Then, of course, he talks about how to perform action in the world, and he describes role models, including himself, and says what are the details of actually carrying out karma yoga in the world. Then Arjuna asks another question about, why is it that even knowing what I need to do, the mind starts doing something else? And this is Lord Krishna then mentions to him how the desire is the inner enemy, the enemy within, which clouds the mind and does not allow it to access the true self within oneself. And then the knowledge and the action and the relationship is mentioned in chapter number 3, last verse, which kind of points out the relationship between knowledge and action. And of course, in chapter number 4 and 5, he develops this intimate relationship between knowledge and action, between renunciation on the one hand and engagement with life and living on the other. So this kind of unfolds in the next 2 chapters as well. So this is the logic which kind of unfolds itself, and this is what we're going to talk about today. And of course, the last thing, which is your part of the bargain, as it were, what will you do now? Your homework, your reflection, your action, your practice of the concepts which we're going to talk about today. So living through the Gita is what this homework is all about for you. So let's start with the first thing, the logic and the flow of thought so far. So you will remember that Arjuna has convinced himself that the war is pointless and it has no meaning for him. And he gives 5 arguments why he will not fight, including, compassion for his kith and kin, the loss of meaning in terms of, what this all means, the loss of enjoyment, and, he's undergoing some kind of crisis in terms of his identity, his choices, and so on and so on. And he is in that condition whereby he kind of becomes dysfunctional. Greatest warrior becoming dysfunctional because he sees the dangers in continuing this battle and fears the consequences of war. He is no longer sure of himself, his royal, his choices. And, with that breakdown of his own confidence in terms of what he needs to do, he is in an extremely distressed state. So Arjuna says in chapter number 2:7, my mind is overpowered by the taint of emotion, pity, and grief. And my intellect is confused as to what is my duty, what should I do, what is the choice I should make, and what is the action I should take. And tell me decisively what is good for me, and instruct me who have taken refuge in thee. Okay, so far Lord Krishna has not said anything. He has just taken him to the middle of the battlefield. But when Arjuna actually tells him, instruct me what to do, then he actually starts giving him the guidance, because he's no longer the friend who is sitting in the chariot. He then becomes the teacher. And this change of role, we can see, begins in chapter number 2, in verse number 11. So from 11 to 30, Krishna's guidance is on the basis of knowledge. Arjuna's condition is that I am in grief because I have to kill. I will kill. I cannot bear this and I will not fight. So in terms of, we can just kind of summarize the whole guidance in these 4 verses or 5 verses. So Lord Krishna says the wise person does not grieve. He does not grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. Why? Because, in fact, there is no such thing as death for the Atman, your true self. And your true self is that which is the eternal self, which is the changeless self. But the jiva travels from childhood to youth to old age, just like it travels in one life. So also from body to body, life after life, this cycle of birth and death will continue. Okay, so it means that once somebody dies, that's not the end of it, according to our belief, that this is what happens, that you go through this cycle of birth and death again and again and again. Just like you go through the transitions in one life, you go through a transition in the cycle of birth and death. In this embodied form, therefore, it means that experiences will be there, and experiences will have a beginning and it will have an end. What you have to do, endure them bravely, because there's no choice. You are in this embodied form, and therefore there is no choice. You have to endure them, right? But enduring doesn't mean that you have to endure them saying that, oh, I can't do anything about it, because really the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita is that there is definitely something you can do, even in this embodied form, to realize your true self. And the firm person who is not afflicted by these experiences in the embodied form is then fit to realize the immortal self. So this is a summary of guidance given to by Lord Krishna to Arjuna. So in terms of the basis of action, then, so what will you do after knowing the self? Know that your right is to work only, never to the result. Let not result be your motive, but do not get attached to inaction. Again, a summary statement of Karma Yoga is all about knowing that, we have to focus on the work itself, not get attached to the result, and the result should not be our motive. We're not doing things because we want to get a certain result out of it. But at the same time, giving all this up doesn't mean that we give up action altogether. He says, perform action, abandon attachment to the result, become steadfast in yoga, and experience equanimity, which is nothing but yoga. Okay, yoga, remember, is the part of the practice. And then he says, seek refuge in knowledge, because ego action with attachment is much lower than yoga. Okay, so we've got ordinary action, we've got karma yoga, and then we've got knowledge itself. So cast off all this self-centered deeds, endowed with knowledge, and devote yourself to yoga. Yoga is what? Yoga is skill in action. So these two outcomes, which if you live according to the Bhagavad Gita, are guaranteed to you. Number one, equanimity of the mind. Number two, skill in action. This is what we are trying to achieve through living through the Bhagavad Gita. And this is what you can experience in your own life if you are willing to put in the practice and follow the philosophy and the practice given in the Bhagavad Gita by Lord Krishna. Okay, so experiential learning. Remember that we have to still consider what we are doing in terms of this learning which we are listening to at the moment, this knowledge which we are getting. We have to take that knowledge and practice it for our own transformation. So this means that we are in a condition of suffering one way or the other, whether it is just a matter of degree. We can be suffering greatly, or we can be suffering in one way or the other. It requires for us to practice the concepts of the Bhagavad Gita, get inner purity of the mind, which is called the process of sattvification, and then self-realization, whereby we establish ourselves in our true nature. And intellectual knowledge will only take you so far. We can keep our knowledge in the head without it making no difference at all. Or even if it does, it only takes us so far. So the intellect needs to guide action with the knowledge which we have acquired, leading to an inner change. So if it is translated into action, knowledge with the help of the intellect gets translated itself into action, then that knowledge definitely will lead to inner change. Okay, this is called living through the Gita. Okay, so you remember we talked about the ego operating system. This is the past conditioning, the vasanas which we are carrying with us in ourselves at a subtle level, which consists of intention, beliefs, and attitudes. And these feed into the body, into the mind as feelings, into the intellect as thoughts. So sensations, feelings, and thought arise in our body, mind, intellect as a result of the past conditioning. Sensations, feelings, and thoughts. And this gives rise to actions in the world. And for those actions we carry out in the world, there are reactions which come back to us to give us more impressions, which are then feed back into the past conditioning. So there is the loop of life which keeps on going on. This is where Arjuna is. This is where we are in terms of ego operating system. Okay. The idea is that we want to go beyond the ego operating system, and through change in belief and attitude and intention, by listening, reflecting, and practicing, and practice and focus, it gives us the transformation. All these things are very important: listening, reflecting, and practicing. And this knowledge which we're going to get is given to Arjuna by Lord Krishna. It is given to us in the form of the text of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so from the ego operating system to the dharma operating system to the God operating system, this is basically the Gita's framework for inner transformation and self-realization. So we are located in the ego operating system. What we have to do is to practice our dharma operating system, which means we become more God-centered, selflessness is developed, detachment is developed, and it becomes a matter of thee and thine. It's no longer me and mine and selfish attachment. Then from there, we go into deeper and deeper meditation, get absorbed in the self, so that then the body, mind, intellect becomes just an instrument for divinity to express itself. So keep on remembering this framework, because this kind of relates to each and every verse of the Bhagavad Gita. One way or the other, it is going to relate to divinity. One way or the other, it relates to our identity and what we are supposed to do. And it also describes in detail what divinity itself is, okay? And what the world is and how we have to interact in the world through the God operating system arising from our practice in the Dharma operating system. So this is very important to kind of keep in mind. So coming back to the structure of chapter number 2, Sankhya is there in terms of knowledge, yoga is there in terms of action, and then the person of perfection, which is really the outcome of having the knowledge and the action combining together to give the realization of the self, which is the person of perfection. So that is really the logic and the flow of thought so far from chapter number 1 to number 2. And then Arjuna asked the question. And again, it is important for us to remember that Arjuna is our representative, is representing you and me. And therefore, when he asks the question, then we have to consider, what is in his mind. likely that it is also in our mind as well. So Bhagavan Krishna has introduced Sankhya and Yoga in chapter number 2, just like we said just now. Sankhya is the knowledge of the self, and Yoga is the action part of it, practice of Karma Yoga. He is asking Arjuna to perform his duty without attachment to the result. He also tells him not to get attached to inaction. Then he tells him of the importance of getting established in prajna. This is knowledge. And giving up all desires, establish yourself in Brahman. Brahman is the ultimate reality. It is the final knowledge in which one has to establish oneself. Arjuna is therefore confused. Why? Because on the one hand, Lord Krishna is telling him to do action. On the other hand, he is saying, renounce actions. Which one is it to be? Why is he telling me to do this terrible, terrible action if knowledge and the path of renunciation is superior? So what he has understood so far from Lord Krishna, he thinks that knowledge is superior and therefore I should not be doing any action. I just renounce everything, get away from everything. It is the thing which I'm looking for because I really don't want to fight the battle. So for him, he's saying, why are you telling me to do this terrible action if, you want me to take a path of renunciation and knowledge? So he says, tell me the one way to attain the highest good. Okay, so he's telling Lord Krishna, tell me really what is the um, thing to do in terms of knowledge and action. So, it means that Arjuna is not clearly grasped the relationship between the path of knowledge of the Sankhyans and the path of actions of the yogis. He has taken it to be a dichotomy, an opposition. It is either one thing or the other, and he wants to know which one to follow. It's like there are two pathways in his mind. Either you follow this one, or if you don't follow that one, then you have to follow the other one, the active or the contemplative. The question is important for us because, on the one hand, we need to understand what these paths are and how do they relate to each other. Are they sequential rather than either or, so that we don't fall into the same kind of confusion saying, I have to follow the path of action. I'm not concerned about the path of knowledge. Or you say to yourself, actually, action does not, interest me. I just want to follow the path of contemplation and meditation. Actually, we'll get into trouble if we think like that, because, like Lord Krishna explains in this chapter and the next two chapters, that the two things are intimately connected together. Without knowledge, there is no right action, and without action, there is no translation of knowledge into our life and transformation. So let's think a bit about the nature of action itself and why it is inevitable. So Lord Krishna makes this clear. He says, not by non-performance of action, you're going to reach actionlessness. Now, actionlessness really is the state of consciousness which is the ultimate consciousness. In that state of consciousness, then there is a complete disidentification with the body, mind, intellect. So it is as if there is no action taking place. In fact, there is no action which can take place in the pure consciousness, pure existence, pure bliss. There is no action which can take place. So this is the state of actionlessness. In other words, the state of self-realization. Nor by only renunciation can you attain perfection. Actionlessness means a state of desirelessness, a state of thoughtlessness, not in the sense of, being stupid, but means that the agitations of the mind are completely gone, a state of complete disidentification with the body, mind, intellect, and therefore actionlessness. Now, mere renunciation without understanding does not lead to perfection. So mere renunciation means what we will see in a minute. But it is saying that just by renouncing, you are not going to reach the perfection. In fact, no one can remain without action even for a moment. So you cannot say to yourself, I'm going to renounce and then stop doing everything. In fact, you can't, because that's the law of nature, that nobody can remain without action even for a moment. And one is not engaging when one is not engaging in action, but the mind is running after sense object. If one is doing that, one is called a hypocrite. Okay, so which means what? that I'm actually not engaged in any action. I'm not going to ask for anything. I'm not going to do anything. But the mind inside is running away after sense objects. So what Lord Krishna calls this as the mithyachari. We'll see that in a minute as well. So how are actions which are inevitable to be done? Definitely not in a hypocritical manner, which means don't pretend that, I'm actually detached from everything, I've renounced everything, but the mind is running away in all directions. But in 3.7 he says, controlling the sense by the mind, engaging organs of action, and karma yoga, which is really nothing but karma yoga, without attachment to the fruit of the action, and such a person excels. This is Lord Krishna himself saying. How to engage with action. Controlling the sense by the mind, engaging organs of action without attachment to the fruit of the action. This is really the essence of karma yoga. And he says, perform your bounden duty, nitya karma, in this manner. Bounden duties, simply spoken of here, is your nitya karma, daily duties, obligatory duties. Okay, action is superior to inaction. Now, inaction means that you're not going to do anything and you're just merely going to renounce. But if the mind is running away all over the place, then of course it has no meaning in terms of your spiritual development. So this is basically what Lord Krishna is introducing to Arjuna about the idea of action. And how does it relate to Karma Yoga? So we have got the ordinary action. We have got action which is done in this system of Karma Yoga. And there is a big difference between the two. So what Karma Yoga is not, let's try to understand what Karma Yoga is not. Number one, it is not the non-performance of action. Number two, it is not mere renunciation. Number three, it is not forced in action with the mind wandering all over. Remember, this is hypocrisy. And what Karma Yoga is? It is excellence in action. So what does it mean? It means controlling the senses by the mind, okay, because the senses run away all over the place. And these are the mechanisms of the ego operating system which need to be overcome by means of controlling the senses and controlling the mind. And what does it require? It requires an aware and alert mind. Remember the 4 A's: awareness, alertness, attention, action, right? All these 4 A's are really important in this manner of controlling the senses by the mind. Also, remember that controlling the senses by the mind does not mean that you are engaged in suppression or repression of the desire, but rather sublimation of the desire. Sublimation means that you're lifting the same desire into a sattvic desire. Okay, so from the rajasic and the tamasic, which is about the me and the mind, you're actually lifting yourself into the sublimated desire and acting in the world according to that. Basically, it means that you're functioning according to karma yoga. Okay, and then what it does, it conserves your energy. If you control the senses by the mind and function in this way, then what happens, you begin to conserve your energy. Energy is not spilling out all over the place, right? So this is number one, controlling the senses by the mind. Number two, selfless action in the world. What does it mean? It means move away from the wrong fields of action and then move to the right field of action. What is the wrong field of action? It is adharma. What is the right field of action? Dharma. Okay, and this again we have to understand within the context of doing karma yoga in terms of understanding what one's role and responsibility is according to one's stage of life, and therefore that becomes moving into the right field of action. So there is a right field of action and a wrong field of action, with the right belief, with the right attitude, and the right intention. Remember, this is the fundamental things we are changing within ourselves. We are changing the belief according to the philosophy and the concept of Bhagavad Gita. Even our attitude has been told by Bhagavan Krishna how to change it and how to change our intention as well. And number three, this excellence in action requires for us to do things without attachment. So basically, what does it mean? Practically speaking, it means desensitize yourself to likes and dislikes. See, we all have likes and dislikes. Remember, this is the another fundamental problem with the mind. It has got this tendency to superimpose things on everything around the world. Even when I see each and every object or a person or a thing in my life, through my lens of past conditioning, I immediately say, I like this, I don't like this. Okay? This we need to desensitize the mind by moving away from the likes and dislikes, because it is taking us away from the past conditioning into the pure sense of doing action in the world through karma yoga, and equal minded to the result of the action. Because if you are attached to the result of the action, what will it mean? It will mean that if I get a good result, I'll be elated. If I get a bad result, I'll be deflated. So this inflation, deflation is taking place all the time, right? And if we give up the attachment to the fruit of the action, then what will happen is this equal mindedness comes about, and we retain this equanimity of the mind. Remember, this is equanimity we are talking about. So here are the three things: karma bhogi, mithyachari, karma yogi. There is a right way and a wrong way of action in the world. Okay. Now, karma bhogi is the one who is in the ego operating system, full of desires, full of likes and dislikes, subject to ego emotion, greed, anger, etc., in a state of ignorance of the truth. And the mithyachari, remember, Lord Krishna himself mentions this mithyachari, the hypocrite, outwardly controlling senses and action. Outwardly, it seems like, oh, this is a great man. He has got so much control. But what is happening in his mind? Inwardly, he's having all kinds of desires. He's entertaining likes and dislikes, and subject to ego emotion of greed and anger, etc. Remember the 6 emotions of the ego. Those are the things which keep on going on in the karma bhogi and the mithyachari as well. Whereas in the karma yogi, then what happens is there is control of the senses by the mind, there is selfless action in the world, and it is done without attachment to the fruit of the action. The me and the mind is getting diminished. In other words, the identification, the attachment is getting diminished, and there is diminishing of the ego emotions of greed and anger, and purification is taking place, sattvification. Okay, so this is why karma yoga is important, because it is a discipline which is going to take us into the state of purification of the mind, which is the preliminary stage of our spiritual pathway. Remember, the first stage is through action, and the second stage is through quiescence, which is that the mind has become pure, it has become quiet. Then you are able to dwell deeply into meditation, get absorbed in yourself, and discover your true identity. Okay, so therefore, Arjuna, Lord Krishna tells him, perform your bounden duty. Action is superior to inaction. So there are 4 groups of karma: nitya karma, daily duties to role and stage of life; naimitya karma, which is duties for special occasion; kamya karma, special rituals for acquisition; nishiddha karma, immoral, undivine, forbidden actions. So out of that, we have to make sure that our actions are going in the right direction, that we are doing the right thing. Okay, this also applies to the field of action in which we are engaged. So let's now look at the spirit of yagna and the wheel of action. But remember that, this is very important, that the bounden duty, which means your nitya karma, according to the role and stage of life, translates itself as what? If you do your bounden duty, you are actually becoming a dharmic person. You are expressing dharma in your life, because you have given away the selfishness of the me and the mind, and you're doing your duty without any attachment to the fruit of the action, keeping your mind even, and doing your things in the world without any kind of disturbance. Okay, so this is very important to remember. Now, Lord Krishna is giving a very big picture to Arjuna, the spirit of yagna and the wheel of action, and how these are related to the concept of karma yoga. So this important concept of yagna or sacrifice is given in 3.9. Yagna, sacrifice, selfless action is woven into the very fabric of creation. Very interesting. He's saying the totality of creation, which is nothing but Ishvara. Within this fabric of the creation, this, this spirit of yagna is embedded. The cause and effect, the sacrifice is also embedded in this very fabric of creation. And in the creation is you and me as sentient beings. So there is a relationship between this big picture, as it were, of the cosmos, the creation, and me in the creation. And how does this cosmic, macrocosmic kind of functioning help me to understand my microcosmic world in which I have to function in terms of action? Okay, so every action brings about bondage unless it is performed in the spirit of yagna and sacrifice. See what is happening at the cosmic level. There is this, and I'll explain that in a minute. But every action brings about bondage, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, unless it is performed in the spirit of yagna or sacrifice. Ordinary action done with egocentric desire leading to thickening of the me and the mind. Remember, the ego identity is becoming thicker. Why? Because I do my ordinary action according to the egocentric desires. Those which are done with the yagna spirit do not create impressions in my mind, and therefore they lead towards the purification. This inner purification is going to come through this yagna spirit which I'm now having, which is nothing but performing my karma according to the karma yoga philosophy, and then that will lead me to final liberation. So what is this yagna spirit, you may ask? Two ways of understanding, Vedic and Vedantic. And Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna that this yagna spirit can be understood in two ways. One is the Vedic and the other one is Vedantic. So let's look at the Vedic way of understanding. Ritual offerings with the Vedic chanting, offering samagri into the fire. Remember, we put those, what you call the seeds and everything into the fire. And this yaja, from which yagna is derived, can be seen as deva pujanam, worship, unity. It can be seen as dana or charity. And there are 400 different types or more of yagnas which are described in the Vedas. Out of these, 21 are considered compulsory, nitya karma. Okay, that's why this word nitya karma is used by Lord Krishna. But it does not mean this nitya karma in the Vedic understanding. For example, Agnihotra is supposed to be done twice a day. I don't know how many people actually do the Agnihotra nowadays, but that was supposed to be done twice a day if you lived your life according to the Vedic understanding. And the rest of the things are optional and they lead to kami karma. And therefore, all these different kind of yagnas are mentioned in the Vedas. So then we can think of the Panch Mahayagnas. Brahma Yajna, study of the scripture; Deva Yajna, worship of the deities; Pitru Yajna, worship of the ancestors; Manushya Yajna, for fellow human beings; Bhuta Yajna, for all living creatures and the whole earth. See how wonderful our tradition is. It is telling us that take care of all these different levels of your existence. If you neglect any of these things, you'll get into trouble. Just like we are in lockdown now. Why? Because we haven't done the Bhuta Yagna. We have not looked after the living creatures on this earth. We have not looked after the earth, and here we are. So it is important to remember these are Mahayagnas. And everybody should think about what am I doing in terms of Brahma Yagna, Deva Yagna, Pitru Yagna, Manushya Yagna, Bhuta Yagna. Because this becomes like a kind of understanding where your life is, what is your relationship to all these things, right up to the ultimate reality, right down to the material reality. Each one has to be taken into account. This is the Vedic understanding. And it means coming into right relationship with all these levels according to the Vedic way. So the allegorical meaning of yagna, the Vedantic understanding, is Agni is Brahma Agni, which is the fire of Brahman, the ultimate reality or Ishvara. Havan Samagari is actions which are poured into this fire. Okay, and the leftovers of the Havan are the results of action. Right. So if we think in that context, then Swami Chinmayananda, our Gurudev, says, yagna is any sacrificing work undertaken in the spirit of self-dedication for blessing of all. See how wonderfully the spirit of yagna is translated in terms of our day-to-day, moment-to-moment reality, in terms of the actions which we carried out. And this is sacrificing work. Sacrificing means I'm giving up the fruit of the action. I'm indeed giving up my own sense of identity. I'm giving up this sense of doership. I'm giving up this sense of enjoyership. This is the sacrifice which is taking place. At the personal level, at the communal level, national level, this spirit must carry on. And with cooperation and self-dedication, without attachment to the results. And Bhagwan transforms the meaning of yagna from the Vedic to the Vedantic. So, because again, we have to understand the kind of historical context in which this is arising, and therefore the shift is away from the Vedic, which is mere ritualism, to bringing it right into the middle of the battlefield. It is bringing this knowledge of the Vedas right into the middle and the center of our life and placing it there, saying, here's what you need to do. Translate this Vedic way of thinking into the Vedantic way so that it relates to your functioning at the body, mind, intellect level. So this is a wonderful way in which Lord Krishna is describing the spirit of yajna. Then he goes on to describe the cosmic wheel of action. He says the creator Prajapati in the beginning created mankind with the sacrifices that will allow one to prosper. So imagine that here is the Prajapati is the creator, Brahma. He is now creating this whole creation, including mankind, and all the stuff which goes into this creation. When this is taken together, it will allow the individual one to prosper, but under some conditions. Okay, so the highest good is attained by mutual nourishment of the devas. This is what he says in 11 and 12. Now, what is a deva? Okay, so we have to understand the concept of deva here as well. And he says, ordinary sense, deva is a deity, universal power active in the world of phenomena. And if you can think of this as the universal power, then there is a relationship between the devas and the creation. This is called the universal law of sacrifice, yajna. And at the individual level, relationship can be selfish. In other words, that if I relate to the world and I am relating it to in this selfish way, then I will go out and grab without giving anything back. And Lord Krishna calls this person who does that as a thief. He is a thief who only takes and does not give. This relationship can be selfish. I want, and I want. It can be one of sacrifice. I dedicate all action for the greater good. This is real dharma, okay, in terms of how we live our life. If you disobey this universal law, selfishness and suffering will arise. If you obey, then selfless action will lead to greater good and it will lead to liberation. So this is why, in our tradition, dharma, this universal law is so important. Because if we disobey that, what happens is what we are experiencing now. Productive potential obtained. Blessing by the devas when we obey the universal law, this immortal cosmic dharma, if we kind of tune our mind and actions to this cosmic dharma, then we will be blessed by the devas. Okay? So at a deeper level, this is what is happening. At the cosmic level, which is then also happening at my individual level. So the law of sacrifice translated into the individual becomes the law of selfless service. In other words, karma yoga. So can you see the connection between spirit of yajna, the cosmic will, and individual action, which translates itself as karma yoga? Absolutely wonderful philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, which doesn't talk about the individual, but talks about the individual in the context of the whole cosmos. And this is, an absolutely wondrous thing. And cooking your own food and eating it is called karma bhoga, but eating the remnants of sacrifice is called karma yoga. In other words, the remnants of sacrifice is that I will accept whatever I get as a result of carrying out my actions. This is actually detachment from the fruit of the action as well. So here is the summary: Vedic interpretation, action, sacrifice, rain, food, and action. Okay, and the Vedantic interpretation is selfless action, favorable condition, which results in the good for all, and it sustains life and it sustains dharma. In other words, the cosmic is sustained through our individual effort in this kind of way. So this is the yagna spirit and the cosmic wheel of action. So let's go further. Whoever does not follow this wheel lives a sinful life, rejoicing in the senses. Whoever follows it rejoices in the self, with the self, is content, and nothing more needs to be done. But Arjuna, Lord Krishna is saying, you are not yet established in the highest, and therefore always perform action which should be done without attachment, and thus attaining to the supreme, you will get the final result, realization. So this is why this is the connection between action and knowledge. Knowledge is about knowledge of the supreme, knowledge of the self. And this can only be attained by performing action in the right way. So do you see the connection between knowledge and practice now? Okay. So let's go to the next one, which is how to perform action in the world. And he gives us some role models. Whether realized or not, great people work in the world with control and detachment for the purification and loka sangraha for the greatest good. King Janaka is one example, and Bhagwan himself gives his own example of how to act in the world, and the consequences of not acting in the right way, we know, are disastrous. You yourself, each one of you who is in this talk, you are a leader to somebody. There is actually somebody who is looking up to you, and this person will follow you. And Lord Krishna says somebody somewhere is following you. So make sure that you discharge your moral responsibility to act without attachment in the best interest of everyone. Because you are a role model to somebody, make sure you function in the best way. This is your dharma. So now he brings in the idea of the gunas. The gunas are the basis of action in the material universe. Now you know what the gunas are: the sattvic guna, the rajasic guna, and the tamasic guna. Because this is also, it will relate to the to the to the knowledge itself towards the end of this chapter. So the deluded person thinks, because I am the doer, I am the enjoyer, and he has got this sense of agency that I'm this doer, and I'm going to grab this result. I'm going to be attached to this result. I know that I want this result. And this deluded person thinks, I am the doer and I'm the enjoyer of the fruit of the action. But the wise man knows the guna karma vibhaga and knows that he is neither the doer nor the enjoyer. He is just the instrument of the body, mind, intellect in the service of divinity. This is the wise man. Okay, and you remember the perfection, the man of perfection. This is really kind of, if you look at it from this point of view, he's also gone beyond the guna karma into the self. Okay, so here, how do we then get to this a place whereby I am not the doer and I'm not the enjoyer? And this is now the 5-point plan of freedom in action, karma yoga, for purification. Even if you don't remember anything else, remember this 5-point plan, because this is the heart of karma yoga. Solution to the problem of identification with guna, all the 3 gunas, and ordinary action. Therefore, he says, renouncing all actions in me, with the mind centered on the self, free from hope and egoism, free from mental fever, you do fight. Okay. Now, fighting in the case of Arjuna, but carrying out our actions in our own lives according to our what you call role and responsibility. Remember this 5-point plan and remind yourself again and again of this. If nothing else, just memorize this particular verse in the Bhagavad Gita, because this is your starting point in terms of your spiritual path, and this is how it needs to be done. Okay, and consciously how we are going to do it, I'll tell you later. Those who act in the faith, they get freed from action. Those who don't have faith, cavil the teaching, they are doomed to destruction. Even a wise man acts according to his own nature. What about the ignorant person? Because even the wise man, although he is in that wisdom of the knowledge, is not yet established in it. Therefore, even his own nature can carry him away. Attachment and aversion are in the senses, don't come under their sway. These are further instructions to Arjuna. Better to do one's own duty imperfectly than others' duty perfectly. Better is death in one's own duty than fear which arises out of duty of another. Actually, he's hinting at Arjuna, telling him that you want to do the duty of somebody else because you want to run away from the battlefield. Actually, it's better to do your own duty imperfectly rather than to do somebody else's duty. So this is the transformation track, Purushartha, path of Karma Yoga. Okay, this is based on chapter number 3, verse number 30. Swabhava. This is each one of us has got a swabhava. This is based on our past conditioning, our vasanas, inclination, tendencies, our belief, attitude, and intention. And this swabhava is the one which is then translated or transformed into swadharma, which is through our buddhi. Buddhi is the key instrument in translating and controlling the senses, controlling the mind, and controlling our intellect in such a way that it becomes buddhi yoga. And by that means, we attain swarupa, swabhava to swadharma to swarupa, real self. This is a path of karma yoga. Okay. So, and this is based on 3:30. So every afternoon at 3:30, tea time, remember chapter number 3, verse number 30. Remind yourself of what action is and how action is supposed to be done. So now Arjuna then asks a question. Lord Krishna has explained all this stuff to him. And Arjuna's question is that it looks to me as if, there is some kind of force. He says, but impelled by what does a man commit sin? Though against his wishes, O Varsanya, constrained as it were by force. Okay, so remember, Lord Krishna is talking about what? He's talking about control of the senses, control of the mind. He's saying, forget about the past, forget about the future, imagination, stay in the present moment, but forget about the fear, the fever in the mind in the present moment. And it looks like a lot of tapas, a lot of discipline. And you know that you want to do and you wish to do it in that particular way, but somehow the mind seems to be carried away by force. What is that force? Okay. Very relevant question. Remember, Arjuna's question are your question and my question. Because this question which would have arisen in your mind is to say, oh my God, this looks very difficult. How am I going to control my senses? How am I going to control my mind? How am I going to become, kind of forget about my past conditioning and not bring the past into the present? How can I forget about the imagination of the future and what the result is going to be? How can I prevent it from coming into the present moment? How can I even stay in the present moment and forget about the agitation in the mind and stay focused on the action itself? A lot of things to do, right? And therefore, Arjuna is asking this question. Actually, this is going to be very difficult. It is, constrained as it by some force, it will make me to go in the wrong direction. Okay? I wish to go in the right direction, but it is taking me in the wrong direction. So Bhagavan gives him the answer. He says, it is desire, it is anger, born out of Rajoguna, all devouring, all sinful. This is the foe here. This is the enemy. What is the enemy? Desire. Remember, desire and anger are like twins. Desire, when it is frustrated, becomes anger. Desire, when it is entertained, becomes greed. So, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, all these are the emotions of the ego, will then express themselves through this Rajoguna. So, this Rajasic personality this Rajasic Tamasic personality, at the heart of this personality is this desire, which is pushing this Rajasic personality. And it is all devouring. It takes over our life. It is, in fact, the life which we are living is nothing but the expression of this desire. And if you think about why we get angry in our life, you will work it out. You will see what is this connection between desire and anger. It is all devouring. It is all sinful because it is taking you away from your divinity. That is the enemy here. So Bhagwan describes the three modes of nature and how each one covers the wisdom um, of self-knowledge. So we're just running a bit over the time, but just bear with me. We're just about to finish. The sattvification of vasanas takes place through going from the ego operating system to the dharma operating system. In the tamasic person, the wisdom is confined in darkness like the fetus in the womb. So here's the fetus inside the womb, and it is completely in darkness. It has no idea of what even light is. Okay. So this wisdom, which is the true knowledge of the self, in a tamasic person is as if confined in darkness like the fetus in the womb. Then it takes a long time for it to mature. You can't say, okay, now baby, come out quickly, right? There is a certain maturity which is required, and it is 9 months before it even starts coming out of that confinement. And it is living in that darkness. It takes time before it is mature to come out in the world. In the Rajasic person, the wisdom is covered like the dust on the mirror. So there is a difference between the two now, and you can see what the difference is, right? In the first one, fetus in the womb, there's not much you can do. You have to leave it, and it will bring about its own result at a certain point in time. In the Rajasic person, the wisdom, the self-knowledge is like the dust on the mirror. So what happens when you have dust on the mirror? The dust does not allow the full clear reflection to be seen. Okay? So when we want to look at our pretty face in the mirror, what do? There is a lot of dust, and sometimes there's a lot of steam as well. You just had a bath, you want to clear it. What do? You have to take some action. Okay? Effort is required to wipe the dust off the mirror. So when you wipe the dust, what are you doing? You are taking away that is preventing something which is going to allow you to see the reflection in the mirror. Dust is preventing you to see the image. In the Rajasic person who is full of desire, it is like this dust on the mirror. So he or she has to work and make the effort to wipe the dust of the mirror. Now, what do you think this wiping of the dust of the mirror is? We've been talking about all this all along in this talk. It is karma yoga. For the Rajasic person, karma yoga is about doing the right action in the right way, with the right attitude, with the right intention, with the right belief in the world. And as we keep on doing that, what are we doing? We are wiping off the dust of the mirror. For the tamasic person, it is much more of a bodily kind of way of functioning. Therefore, the Hatha Yoga, for example, is the way in which slowly by slowly, through the body consciousness, one begins to rise into the mental and intellectual consciousness. In the Rajasic person, it is much more about the mental and the intellectual kind of expression through the body, and he is in action all the time, fulfilling its desire. Remember, desire comes from where? It comes from the vasanas. The vasanas are Rajasic vasanas, which are saying, here's what I want, this is who I am, and this is what I want. I want to go out into the world to get this thing, to make myself feel complete and to fulfill myself. This particular way of functioning, remember what it was called? Karma bhogi. Rajasic person who is a karma bhogi, he wants to enjoy the fruit of the action, then starts coming to the path of spirituality, and he says, actually, I need to change something. What do I need to change? I need to change my belief about myself and the world. Okay? This is the knowledge. I need to change the attitude with which I am looking at myself and my action in the world, and attitude about the whole world itself. I'm looking at the world at the moment that each and everything in this world is for me, for my completion. It is for the fulfillment of my desire, whether it is a material thing or whether it is a person or whether it is a situation. I want to get fulfillment and everything becomes an object of my desire. I have to start seeing that this is nothing but the expression of the divine. It is not for me. It is actually divinity working through my body, mind, intellect, which needs, in the spirit of sacrifice, in the spirit of yagna, attune itself to the cosmic wheel of action. And therefore, I have to function in the world according to Karma Yoga. This is the effort which is required by the Rajasic person. Remember, it is going from the ego operating system to the Dharma operating system. This is where the effort is required. And the primary means, of course, is Karma Yoga. In the Sattvic person, what has already happened is the purification has taken place. Why? Because either in this life or in a previous lives, the work of this Rajasic energy has already been done. So the dust has been cleaned off the mirror in the Sattvic person. Now this Sattvic person, the wisdom is covered as smoke covers the fire. Okay. Now you can see how it becomes easier and easier as we go from the tamasic and the rajasic to the sattvic person. The smoke covers the fire, which means that even a small breeze can remove the smoke. You don't need to make that much effort. Just even a word from the guru can take away this smoke. Even a bit of satsang with the Mahatmas can take away the smoke. And this sattvic person gets it. He gets the wisdom. He gets the realization of the self. Okay? And the fire then is seen clearly very soon. It does not require much effort. It does not take much time. And very soon, this sattvic person goes beyond the gunas into the state of realization. So now what has all this got to do with Karma Yoga? Okay. So what it has to do is that at the heart of this idea is that the sattvification of the vasanas will take place going from the ego operating system to the dharma operating system. And this sattvification, first of all, starts with action in the tamasic person, dharma in the rajasic person, and self-realization in the sattvic person through meditation. So, in other words, the karma yoga has got a certain place which is sequential. In other words, karma yoga comes before jnana yoga. The action which is to be done with the knowledge then begins to purify the person, and this purification leads to the sattvification of the mind and the intellect, and therefore the mind is now ready to go into deepest of meditation, get absorbed in the self, and realize the true nature of oneself. Remember, this is the journey which we have to take from suffering to sattvification to self-realization. And therefore, sattvification is going to arise through the practice of karma yoga. Okay? So, this desire is the enemy within. And depending on the swabhava of each person, the hidden wisdom will be available with the proper and appropriate sadhana. So you remember that there is a swabhav of the tamasic swabhav, rajasic swabhav, sattvic swabhav. Each one has got a swabhav. In other words, the past conditioning. So this swabhav is what? Swabhav is the texture of your vasanas. It is the texture of your beliefs and your attitudes and your intention. If they are sattvic, then that means that you have a sattvic swabhav. If they are rajasic, then it is a rajasic swabhav. If it is tamasic, it is a tamasic swabhav. And remember what I mentioned, from swabhava to swadharma, from swadharma to swarupa. This is the journey which needs to take place. And therefore, depending on the swabhav of the person, the prescription is given. So just like you go to the doctor and say, look, I've got this particular sickness at the moment. Hopefully we are not having any kind of sickness, but if there is a sickness, we go to the doctor. Doctor says, here's a prescription because the diagnosis is that you are having this particular condition. In the same manner, there's a way in which we can assess our own swabhava. Okay? And according to the swabhava, and 90% of us will fall into the category of rajasic swabhava. And therefore, Arjuna, being the representative of this 99% or 90% of the whole of humanity, is saying, start with karma yoga. Okay? And for the sattvic person who has gone beyond maybe 5-10% of the world, then for them it is about deep absorption, contemplation, meditation. They don't have to go through this cleansing process of the mind through karma yoga. You can go straight into meditation, contemplation on the path of knowledge. So this desire is the enemy which is covering the wisdom. What is this desire? This is the vasanas, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. In this case, there will be different proportions of these vasanas, which can either be sattvic or rajasic or tamasic. And this is nothing but ignorance. So desire is equal to ignorance, is equal to vasana, and this is the one which is covering up the wisdom, the knowledge of the self. So what Lord Krishna is saying, this is your enemy number one. Enemy doesn't exist outside. In fact, if you think about the battlefield and Arjuna's position in it and the Kauravas and the Pandavas, you will see a connection somewhere here as well. Okay, so it says, this desire is lurking in the senses. It is lurking in the mind and the intellect. Lurking means what? It means desire, when it is functioning through the senses, does what? Through the senses, I say to myself, oh, I can see my object of my desire. Immediately starts going towards that object of desire. Mind starts feeling this kind of tension of obtaining that object. And the intellect starts working out, how can I get this thing in my life? Okay. So this desire is lurking everywhere in the senses, in the mind, in the intellect. And what it does, it deludes the embodied being by veiling the wisdom. Okay, just like we saw that this desire is covering up this wisdom. Okay, and it keeps us in this darkness of ignorance. So asatoma satgamaya. It means that take me from this darkness, tamasoma jyotirgamaya. Tamaso means what? This darkness of ignorance, take me into the light of wisdom. But that is not going to happen just like that. How is it going to happen? I need to do self-effort, karma yoga. Okay, so he says this delusion is coming because this desire is lurking there all the time. It is ever present, and it is an ever-present danger because it is the enemy. Okay, so therefore, what he says, how do you kill the enemy within? Remember, Arjuna is a warrior. He wants to know how to kill enemy, right? So this is the enemy within. He says the enemy is not there. The enemy is really within. So if we think about the battlefield, Mahabharata, what is happening? The Kauravas and the Pandavas, as I mentioned right at the very beginning, is nothing but the representation of our own inner antakarna. There is a whole 100 negative tendencies. There is the 5 positive tendencies, and there's a battle going on between the two. Okay, and at the heart of all this thing is desire, and this enemy is going to be killed. How? He says, control the senses, kill this sinful thing that is the destroyer of wisdom. Okay, control the senses means it doesn't mean that you just close your eyes and close your ears. No, senses are controlled by what? They are controlled by the mind. What is the mind controlled by? It is controlled by the buddhi. So in other words, that if you really want to destroy this thing, then you have to use the intellect to redirect the thought process, to take the feelings in the right direction, and therefore perform the action in the right way. This is karma yoga. The control of senses is just an indication of the complete discipline of the body, mind, intellect to take it into the right direction. And if we do that, control of the senses will actually kill the desire. Why? Because we will migrate from the dharma operating, from the ego operating system to the dharma operating system. And when we do that, effectively what we are doing is killing of the desire. Why? Because it's no longer about me and mine. It is about dedicating all my actions to the Lord. Therefore, me is not there anymore. Ishwar Arpan Buddhi, Prasad Buddhi. These are the two principles of Karma Yoga. Ishwar Arpan Buddhi means I'm dedicating all my actions to the Lord. Okay, there is no my desire. It is desire according to the wish of the Lord. And Prasad Buddhi is that I am detaching from the fruit of the action. Whatever I get is the grace of God. It is the gift of God. So this is right at the heart of it. Control of the senses means that control of the body, mind, intellect, control of the thought process and the feeling and the action. And that is what Karma Yoga is asking us to do. Okay? And this is what Lord Krishna says, is true self is right at the top, then the intellect, then the mind, then the senses, then the body. Okay? And it is expressing itself right throughout, except that the true self is giving the sentiency to the body, mind, intellect and allowing it to function this way. But in this state of desire, having all this desire, it kind of hides the self from us. So thus knowing the self, knowledge, superior to the intellect, restraining the self through karma yoga action, by the self, jnana yoga, slay the enemy called desire. No doubt, very hard to conquer. Okay, so don't be afraid. It is hard to conquer, but it is not unconquerable. It means Purusharth is required. Remember the Purusharth, Swabhava to Swadharma to Swarupa. Or we can say from the ego operating system to the Dharma operating system to the divine operating system. And this means that we have to constantly try again and again and again to practice. Purusharth, Abhyas and Vairagya. This is what Lord Krishna is going to mention to Arjuna. Okay, how to control the mind. And Abhyas means what? It means doing something over a long period of time without a break, with determination, with the knowledge, and knowing that there is a goal to be reached. This is how we should engage in our spiritual path. This is our sadhana on a daily basis, and this is the perfect opportunity for us to reflect and to practice the concept of karma yoga. So now this is what you got to do. Okay, how to kill the enemy within. Lord Krishna is saying restrain the self through karma yoga, by the self slay the enemy, and therefore understanding that, then what are you going to do? Here's your homework. Okay, listen, read, reflect on the content of chapter number 3 on Karma Yoga. Ensure that you understand the logic of Karma Yoga. Okay, not only in terms of the individual, but how is it related to the idea of sacrifice and the cosmic wheel of action. reflect on how this translates itself into your own personal individual life. Very important to go through this reflection, through this understanding, reading again and again, listening to it again and again, so that you grasp the knowledge in the best way possible, so that there is no doubt or confusion in your mind. Then, what is the key element of Karma Yoga and how will you practice it? Memorize verse number 330. Most important, take each element of this verse, practice it daily in your life in all situations. While you are doing any work, remember to convert it into yoga of action. Not ordinary action, but just by the inner attitude, the inner belief, and the inner intention, you can convert any action into Karma Yoga. Remember that, important. And therefore, you can't say, I'm going to do Karma Yoga when I go to this place or that place. No, it has to be done moment to moment in everything which you do. And therefore, grasp this idea and understand it well. And if you go back again and again to verse number 30, then you will see what you require to be done and become aware of what difference it makes into your mental state. Because immediately, as soon as you start practicing Karma Yoga, you will see the mind starts quietening down. This is the amazing thing. You can actually, experience this immediately. So enjoy the sadhana, stay safe, and stay well. Thank you very much. And this is how it is going to be done. Just a reminder, again, going back to our last session, the 4 A's, B's, C's, and D's. Remember that again, come back to it again and again so that you can know what to change, how to change it. Thank you very much. And Hari Om. Hopefully next month, if the lockdown is over, I don't know whether it's going to be over or not, but we'll come back to our session number 5, which is going to be on the next chapter. Okay, and we will then take up this kind of connection between Karma Yoga and how it is then going to be connected with the knowledge, renunciation, and how it is going to lead us to a mind which is then fit for purpose. It is fit to get into the deepest contemplation and absorption, which is chapter number 6. So thank you very much and Hari Om, and see you next time. If you have any questions, please send me.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, Ramesh
Hari Om,
Bhai.
Ramesh
We haven't done the prayers.
Yeah, say the prayers. Jayashree, thank you for reminding.
Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Asato Ma Satgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Hari Om,
Hari Om.
everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you.
Hari
Hari
Om.
Om.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ramesh Bhai. Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you.
Ramesh Bhai.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om, everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you, Ramesh Bhai, and Hari Om.
Yeah, Mishkan. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, everyone.
Hari Om, Ramesh Bhai.
Hari Om, Salvi.